Y'all excited to be here? That's good. Hey, where are my middle schoolers at in the room right now? Middle schoolers, make some noise. Okay, cool. Where are my high schoolers at in the room right now? High schoolers, make some noise. I love it. Where are my adults in the room? Adults, make some noise right now. Okay, come on. I love it. My adults over 50 in the room right now, make some noise. All right, yep, there's one of y'all. Okay, all right, cool. My police officers in the room right now, make some noise. Come on, give it up for them. I love it. Well, hey, my name is Gerald. Thank you, I appreciate it. And I'm really excited to be here with you guys tonight. They told me I had 30 to 35 minutes, and I'm probably going to go for at least an hour and 45 minutes. So I hope y'all are with me. Thank you. But hey, couple things that you guys should know about me before we jump in. The first thing you need to know about me is both of my parents are African. Now, when I say African, I don't mean like African American. I mean like African. I'm talking like Lion King, Madagascar, Jungle Book, like African. My dad's name is Oluwafemi. He's from Nigeria. My mom's name is Ekwa. She's from Liberia. Somehow the two came together and had a kid by the name of Gerald. Right. It's like the whitest name for the blackest person you've ever seen in your entire life. Some of you, I walked out and you thought, I bet he's really good at hide and go seek. I am. I'm the best at it. Second thing you need to know about me is I'm married. I've been married to my beautiful wife for 2.5 years. Her name is Kylie. I was going to give them a picture and I totally forgot, but she cheered for the Falcons for 4 years. So just know I did really good. I did really, really good. And then the third thing you need to know about me is I've had a few embarrassing moments in my life, One in particular that I was thinking about as I was preparing for tonight, it happened my freshman year in high school. I remember I walked into my first day of freshman year, and all of my friends from middle school were there, and so I was feeling like the man. I made JV basketball my freshman year, and so I thought, man, I'm going to be the next LeBron or the next Kobe, or you could put them together in one body and just call me LeBroby. I don't know. I thought this is who I was going to be, and so I was feeling myself as I walked into high school. Weeks went by, and there was this girl that I started having a little bit of a crush on. I'm not going to say her name because we're still friends, but this girl in particular at my school, she was kind of the girl that everyone thought was like really pretty, but everyone was afraid to ask her out because they figured that they were going to get a no. And so I told myself, you know what, I'm not going to be afraid. I'm just going to go for it. Because if I'm the only one to ask, of course she's going to say yes to me. And so I remember vividly in my bedroom looking into my mirror, just practicing, getting ready for that day. I was looking in the mirror like, all right, baby, you got this. You got this, baby, you got this. You hot chocolate, she can't say no to you. Come on, you good. All right, I'm going to practice my lines. I'm going to walk up to her. I'm just going to be like, hey, so me and my boys were having Bible study last night, Christian. And I was reading through the book of Numbers, and I just realized I don't have yours. Let me get them digits, girl. Hey. Right, so I'm like practicing my lines in the mirror. I'm like, yo, you got this. It's going to be great. I wake up in the morning. I hop up out the bed, turn my swag on, take a look in the mirror, say, what's up? Yeah, I'm getting money. Oh, I walk out of the door, and I head to school. First period goes by. I'm doing well. Second period goes by. Good. Third period goes by. I'm great. Fourth period is lunch. And now my palms are sweaty. My knees weak. Right. I start walking into the lunchroom and I see her sitting at the table with all of her girls and they're just like, slay, oh my gosh. And I'm like, okay, like, I gotta do it. And so I walk over to my table, I put my book bag down, I look at all of my boys and I say, y'all, it's about to go down. And they looked at me and they said, what's about to go down? And I just said, you wasn't ready, it's going down, okay, just watch. And so I start walking over to the table. And y'all, here's the thing, I'm not gonna lie to you. I got about halfway and I punked out. I went back to my table and I proceeded to do the worst thing that a freshman in high school could do. I picked up my book bag, I opened it up, I pulled out a notebook, I turned to a blank sheet of paper, and I proceeded to write, "Would you like to go out sometime?" Right. I folded the note in fours and walked over with confidence, like, she has no idea. I dropped it off, kept walking. Now, I don't know why, in my mind, I expected that she was going to run after me and be like, "Oh my gosh, yes, of course I would love to go out with you. I'll be the marshmallow to your hot chocolate." She was white, in case you didn't get that. But instead, what ended up happening was I turn around, and all of the popular girls in my school are pointing and laughing. And it was in that moment that I officially became known at my high school for that first semester of my freshman year as Note Boy. I know. Now, again, I married a former Falcons cheerleader. I'm fine. But I was thinking about tonight and thinking about you guys at the beginning of a new school year and thinking about this experience for me, and it really just led me to a question that I wanted to start tonight by asking. I know we've been like laughing and playing around, but this is where you lean in. And the question that I want to ask tonight really is this, is what are you known for? Like, what do you know? This is rhetorical, don't answer out loud. What are you known for? Like, if I were to ask you that question, some of you would answer that question by saying things about your personality. You'd say you're smart, you're funny, you're shy, you're outgoing. For some of you, you'd answer that question by talking about your character. You'd say you're honest. You'd say you're a hard worker. You'd say you're a leader. For others of you, you'd talk about your appearance. You'd say, "I'm tall, I'm skinny," or "I'm short, I'm pretty, I'm white, I'm black, I'm Latino, I'm Asian, I'm mixed." You talk about the way that you look. For others of you, you might talk about what you do. You might talk about a sport that you play or a club that you're in or an activity that you're a part of. Here's the thing. I don't know how you guys in the second row would answer that question. I don't know how you would talk about how you're known, but as I was thinking about that question, there were a few things that came to mind for me, right? Like if I were to say some things that I am known for, or some labels for me, I would say sneakerhead. Like, I love shoes. I have like 60-something pairs of shoes. It's ridiculous. They're all Nikes, by the way, no Adidas. I think I would say like pastor is a label that I would wear. It's something that I'm known for. It's one of the things that I love the most about my life and the things that I get to do. I would say a husband, because the fact that I get to be married to my wife and do life with her and ministry with her and hang out with her is like one of the most important things about me. I'd say a leader, because I get to lead a team and a ministry, and I have an opportunity to invest in the lives of college students. And so as I think about my life and some things that I would say are true about me, I'd say, yeah, I'm a sneakerhead, and I'm a pastor, and I'm a husband, and I'm a leader. And these are some of the labels that I would say that I wear. And you have labels that you wear as well. But can we just be honest for a second? Like, can we be real? There's a whole nother category of labels, isn't there? Like these are the good ones. These are the ones that we want everyone to see. These are the ones that we feel good about. These are the ones that we want to be known for. But really, there's a whole nother category of labels. Like, for some of you, if you were to be completely honest, one of the labels that you're wearing is worthless. And you wouldn't tell anyone in the room. And you just kind of laugh it off and act like you don't really care about things. And you crack jokes and you become the class clown. And you don't really lean in, but deep down inside, what you're actually feeling right now, if you were to be honest, is that you feel like no one sees you, no one cares about you, you feel worthless. For others of you, a label that you're wearing is failure. And it's not that you failed at some things, but you just feel like a failure. Maybe your parents have told you you'll never be good enough. Maybe your parents have told you you'll never be like your older sibling, and you feel like you're trying your best to measure up, but it seems like you're just failing over and over and over again. Maybe for some of you, the label that you're wearing is stupid. And it doesn't matter how hard you're trying. It doesn't matter how much effort you're putting in. It seems like you just keep wearing this label. You keep being defined as not smart enough. For others of you, the label that you're wearing is mistake. And when you think about your life, you think, I don't even know if my parents really wanted me. I think if they had an option, I wouldn't be here, that they weren't planning for me, that they weren't hoping for me, that I'm really just a mistake. For some of you, the label that you're wearing is unloved. And you're doing everything in your power for someone to care about you, for someone to see you. And so you've been in relationship after relationship after relationship, hoping that someone would just love you, and you just feel unloved over and over and over again. For some of you, the label that you're wearing is forgotten. And you're one of multiple siblings in your family, and it feels like you're the forgotten one. It feels like the older one and the younger one get all of the attention, but here you are in the middle, and nobody seems to care. For some of you, the label that you're wearing, and you would never tell anyone this, is addict. Because there's a website that you keep finding yourself on. Because there's weekends where you don't know what to do with the pain or the stress, and so you turn to a bottle or a drug. And now it's become a habit that you can't seem to break. For some of you, the label that you're wearing, every time you look in the mirror, what you see is ugly. And for some of you ladies, like if we were to be like really honest, you look in the mirror and you think, I hate me. And I don't know if anyone could ever love or like someone like me. For some of you, the label that you're wearing, you got because of one mistake that you made one time, and they labeled you easy. And they said, that's who you are now. It's not just a decision you made, it's who you are. And for a lot of us in the room, like if we were to be really honest, this is what our lives look like. Is that on the outside, we have the labels that we want everyone to see. Oh, I'm an athlete, or I'm in band, or I'm in drama. Oh, I'm pretty, I'm tall. But on the inside, we're wearing labels that are destroying us. On the inside, there are things that we're feeling and wrestling with that we don't know what to do with. On the inside, there are labels that are really defining us that nobody else can see. And so tonight, I want to talk about this idea of our labels. And the reason that I want to do this is because I want to be very clear from the very beginning. This is not God's desire for you. This isn't his hope for you. Middle school students, hear me in the room. His hope is not that you wake up every day trying to be someone else, trying to fit in, and walking around acting like you have it all together when really on the inside you're hurting. High school students, hear me. His hope is not that you go through the next 4 years doing everything in your power to be popular and liked, but on the inside you are dying. This is not God's desire or hope for you. And so I want to talk about our labels tonight. I want to talk about the labels that you've given yourself. I want to talk about the labels that other people have said to you and spoken over you. I want to talk about the labels that you've gotten from decisions that you've made. I want to talk about our labels because the reality of labels is this, is it has the power to define us. It tells us who we are and who we're capable of becoming. They have the power to destroy us, to lead us to places that we never intended to go, to do things to ourselves that we never planned on doing. And they have the power to derail us, to take us fully off track of the plan that God has for our lives. Our labels have power. And so we got to talk about our labels so that we can walk into the hope and the future that Jesus has for us. So to do that, what I want to do is look at one of my favorite passages of Scripture. It's Mark chapter 5. And this is the account of a woman who knows exactly what it's like to be labeled. A woman who knows exactly how a lot of us in the room feel. I'm going to read through her story, and then we're going to come back and pull out a few things. It says this. It says, when Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, A large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying." The other text tells us she was 12 years old. His 12-year-old daughter is dying. "Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all that she had. Yet instead of getting better, she only grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and she touched his cloak because she thought, if I could just touch his clothes, then I would be healed. Immediately, her bleeding stopped and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him, and so he turned in the crowd and he said, "Who touched me? Who touched me?" "You see all of these people against you," his disciples answered. "And yet you ask the question, 'Who touched me?' Jesus, come on." But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and leave your life of suffering," or be freed from your suffering. So Jesus walks into this town, and as we see all throughout the New Testament, as we see all throughout the Gospels, everywhere that Jesus would go, a crowd would follow. They wanted to see what miracles he might do. They wanted to hear what message he might preach. And so this day was no different. Jesus shows up in this town, and the crowds are all around him to see what he might do. And on this particular day, one of the men who was in the crowd was a man named Jairus, who happened to be a synagogue leader. Now, this is important for us to understand because for Jairus, he would have had an extremely important position in his society. He was basically a pastor. This is another way to look at him. And the reason that Jairus is so significant in this story is because the Jewish leaders of the time did not like Jesus. And so Jairus should have been on their team, but what Jairus did made absolutely no sense. Instead of not liking Jesus, he finds himself in this situation where the only hope he has is Jesus. And so he runs to Jesus and says, "My daughter is dying. Is there anything that you can do to help?" So Jesus says, "Yeah, absolutely, I'll help you." And so Jesus is on the way to do an important thing for an important person. There's a little girl's life on the line. You can imagine how the crowds are responding. They're probably freaking out. "Y'all, he's about to do it again. Y'all, Jairus' daughter is about to die. I think Jesus is going. This is crazy. We have to go. Are you coming? Everyone, stop what you're doing. We're going to Jairus' house." And so they all start moving in that direction. Well, as they do, there's another person in the crowd, and it's this woman. What we learn from Mark's account of this story is that this woman has this issue of bleeding that she's dealt with for 12 years. She's dealt with this issue for a really long time. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of what this bleeding was, but I will say this, that culturally for them, according to Levitical law, there was this law that would say as she was bleeding, it would make her unclean. Meaning that she could not go into her house of worship, she couldn't go to church. Meaning that anyone who was around her, who would touch her, would become unclean because they had touched an unclean person. Meaning that anything that she touched would be unclean as well. And so here is this woman who has had this issue of bleeding, who has been labeled unclean by all of her society, and she does not know what to do. And so she works her way through the crowd. You see, this woman is a lot like us. She's been labeled. She's been labeled unclean because of an issue that she has she can't do anything about. Her story's told in 3 different gospel accounts, and not one of the writers mentioned her name. She's been labeled a nobody. We don't even know who she is. We just know her by her issue. She's been rejected. She can't even go into her own church. She can't even go worship. Nobody wants her. And as a result, I would bet she felt unloved, that her own family and friends couldn't even touch her, because if they would hug her, at the minimum, they would be considered unclean as well. And I bet that also made her feel unwanted. No one wanted to be around her. No one wanted to be in her presence. No one wanted to have anything to do with her. She was poor because she had spent everything that she had on every doctor that she could find, hoping that she could fix this issue. She was so desperate that she didn't know where else to turn, so she just goes to Jesus. But the label that I think is the worst for her is this one. She's isolated. And she's alone. And I don't know if it's just the way that I read the scriptures. Maybe it's my imagination. But as I read through this story, my mind immediately cuts to this scene where this woman is sitting in her house by herself at night. She's in the dark, and she's alone. No one wants to be around her. Her family and friends have abandoned her. She hasn't been hugged in years. She hasn't been able to go to church and worship. And I just cut to the scene of this woman sitting alone in her room, isolated, not knowing what to do, not knowing where to turn. And the thing that makes that picture worse for me is that in isolation, all of her labels become louder. She's alone, so now she feels even more unclean. She's alone, so now she feels even more unloved. She's alone, so now she feels even more unwanted. And she's in this room by herself, not knowing what to do. But y'all, there's another label that made all the difference for her. And it was this one right here. She was desperate. She was desperate. And she heard there's this Jesus guy. And he's healed some people. And he's done some miracles. And people have bumped into him and everything has changed when they did. And so she started thinking to herself, if I could just get close enough to touch him, if I could just touch the hem of his clothing, then maybe my situation could change. And so she got desperate and did something that made absolutely no sense. She left her house and she goes out into the crowd. Because how many of you know that desperate people do desperate things? And so this woman gets real desperate. And she goes, hey, I heard Jesus is around. I need to get to him. Excuse me, I'm so sorry, you're in my way. I got to get to Jesus. Excuse me. I heard Jesus is over there. Excuse me, can you move? Move, please, move. What's your name? Pella. Get out my way. Excuse me, Jesus. Oh, Jesus is over there. Excuse me, oh, I'm so sorry. I heard Jesus is, why are you, and people are going, get off me! Why are you touching me, woman? Circle, shut up, Russ! I don't care. I don't, take all my cooties, Russ. I heard that Jesus is here, and so I am going to get to him by any means necessary. And so she pushes her way through this crowd where everyone's looking at her and they're going, you're unclean. You shouldn't be here. You're unclean. You can't touch me. What are you doing? Go back home. You don't belong. But y'all hear me. She didn't care what they thought because she was desperate. And she knew if she could get to Jesus, everything could change. So can I submit this to you tonight? That maybe for some of us in the room, our biggest issue is that we care too much what other people think. Is that for some of you, the reality of your life is you have been locked up in your room and you are dealing with labels that have been placed on you. You have been dealing with things that you believe about yourself. You have been dealing with things that people have said about you in isolation. And it's defining you, and it's destroying you, and it's derailing you from the plans of God. And for some of you in the room, if we were being honest, your labels in isolation have led you to an eating disorder. For some of you, if we're being honest, your labels, the things that you're wrestling with in isolation, have led you to cutting. For some of you, if we're being honest, your labels in isolation have led you to a website, have led you to a drug, have led you to alcohol, have led you to anxiety, has led you to depression, has led you to pain, hurt, guilt, shame, and regret that you don't know what to do with. And maybe tonight, maybe for some of you, what you need to do is what this woman did and go, I don't care what anyone thinks. I need to get to Jesus. Because I think he might be able to change things for me. And so for some of you, you've been holding back in your small groups and you haven't been telling people what's really going on about you because you're so concerned with what they might think about you. And maybe it's time this year in your group to go, guys, I'm just going to be honest. I don't know about anyone else. I need help because I don't know what to do about this. But I think Jesus could do something about it. For some of you in worship, you've been checked out because you don't want other people to make fun of you or think differently about you or put you on #GodSquad. And maybe it's time for you to go, you know what? I don't care. I'm going to worship Jesus because I've seen what he's done in my life and I'm believing he can do it again. Maybe for some of you, it's time for you to go, you know what? I'm not going to sit in rooms and act like I don't care anymore. I do care. And if any of this could actually help, then I'm going to lean in. If this Jesus is really who you say he is, then I'm going to give him a shot. Maybe for some of you, it's time for you to stop falling into peer pressure and hanging out with the people that you've been hanging out with because you're so concerned about what they think. And maybe it's time for you to go, no. I'm desperate. So I don't care what you think anymore. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want this label. So I'm going to get to Jesus. That's what this lady did. She pushes her way through the crowd. She falls down on her hands and knees. She reaches out and just touches the hem of his garment. And when she does, immediately she's healed. Immediately, her 12-year issue is gone. Immediately, the thing that she's been wrestling with for her whole life just disappears, and she's free. And Jesus stops everything. The crowd's going crazy around him. And he says, who touched me? Which one of y'all just touched me? And the guys are like, Jesus. I know, Messiah, I get it. God in human flesh, totally understand. Jesus, everyone's touching you. There's a crowd. What are you talking about? And Jesus is like, Peter, bye. Who touched me? And this woman, trembling in fear, and I think trembling because she's afraid that she's going to be labeled again, trembling because she's afraid that she's going to be judged and condemned, trembling because she's worried that Jesus is going to point a finger at her and say what people have said for her whole life. You're unclean, you're unloved, you're unworthy, get out of here. And so she trembles in front of Jesus. She falls on her hands and knees, waiting to be judged, waiting to be condemned. And Jesus looks at her and says the most incredible thing that he could ever say. He says, daughter, your faith has healed you. Daughter, your faith has healed you. Daughter, your faith has healed you. So go in peace and be freed from your suffering. You know, I've read this passage a few times in my life. And every time I read it, I probably thought what you're thinking right now, that there's like an obvious miracle in this story. This woman for 12 years has had this issue. She's been bleeding. It's made her unclean, so she's an outcast in her society. She runs into Jesus. She touches the hem of his garment. She's healed immediately. She's freed from all of the things that she's been dealing with for the last 12 years. It's a miracle. Amazing. And it is a miracle. But it's only one of the miracles in this story. There's really two miracles that happen in this interaction between this woman and Jesus. One is that Jesus changes her circumstance. And I just need to say this like with integrity as a pastor. I need to say this to you, and I want to be very clear because I don't want anyone to walk out of the room confused. There will be times in following Jesus that you pray and ask him to change your circumstance, and he does immediately, and it's amazing. But there are also times where you will pray and ask God to change your circumstance and ask him to come through and ask him to move in the way that you've been expecting, and at times his answer won't be what you're hoping for. That doesn't make him less good. It doesn't make him less trustworthy. It just means that he knows better than us. And so for this woman, yes, her circumstance changed, and that's amazing. And sometimes that miracle happens for us, but not every time. But the second miracle that happens in the story is a miracle that God comes through on every single time. It does not fail. And it's available to every single one of us tonight. And here's the miracle. Daughter. 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 You see, one miracle is that Jesus changes her situation, but the other is that Jesus changes her identity. And this woman who's been labeled unclean, this woman who's been labeled unwanted, this woman who's been labeled rejected, this woman who's been labeled unloved, Jesus looks at her and says, that is not who you are. Because of your faith in me, because of your trust in me, you have a new label. And it's daughter. And it's son. And the label that's available to each and every one of us tonight is this one. It's child of God. And in this moment, this woman who had been labeled her whole life unwanted, unclean, unloved, unvaluable, has now been labeled a child of the one true King. Now, some of you hear this and you're like, yeah, Gerald, that sounds good. But if she's a child of God, and if you're saying that I can be a child of God, then that means something about God. If I'm a child, then that would make God a parent, that would make God a father. And if God's a father, then I'm out. Because I have a dad, and he left. I have a dad, and even though he's in the house, he's not really around. I have a dad, and he's an alcoholic, and he's abusive. And so if dad is who God is, then I don't want anything to do with that. And can I just say to you tonight, I understand. Like, I'm 30 years old, and I'm just starting to understand what this means. Last April, I got a chance to go on a trip to Israel. Went with a group of 30 of my friends from all over the country. There's student pastors all over the place. And we were sitting at this spot called the Garden Tomb. It's one of the two places that they think Jesus could have been buried and then resurrected from the grave. It's beautiful. The tomb is empty. It's always been. And so we're sitting there with this group, and we're taking communion together, and I'm sitting in silence, just meditating and thinking about life. And as I'm sitting there, I just felt this like nudge, call your dad. I was like, no. Call your dad. No, I'm not calling my dad. Gerald, call your dad. You have to understand this is significant because my dad left when I was in the 3rd grade, and my mom went to jail my junior year in high school. So at 16 years old, I was completely on my own. I had no family. And so this idea to call my dad didn't really make any sense to me, but The irony was that my half-brother, who I'd never met, followed me on Instagram about a month before. And so I was like, all right, God, if that's what you want me to do, I guess I can do that. And so I go up to my hotel room. I DM my brother on Instagram and say, hey, can you send me my dad's number? He says, yeah, he sends it over. I call my dad. First time in 20 years, we've heard each other's voice. Hey, Dad, it's Gerald. And he's silent for a moment. He says, how are you? I'm good. I'm married now. I'm a pastor. We talk on the phone for about half an hour. And just as we're wrapping up, my dad says to me something that I'll never forget in my entire life. He said, Gerald, I know there's been some distance, and I know I've made a lot of mistakes, but I need you to know that I've never stopped loving you. He said, look at your phone. So I open up my phone, and there's a text from my dad. When I open it, there's this picture of me from when I was like 5 or 6 years old. I'd never seen it. My dad said, Gerald, that's what I think about every time I think about you. You're my son. Students, hear me tonight. There may have been some distance between you and God. You may have made some mistakes, but God never stopped loving you. He knows what you're going through. He knows the labels that you're wearing. He knows what you've done, and he loves you anyway. And every time he looks at you, when your faith is in Jesus, what he sees is not your failure. What he sees is not your mistakes. What he sees is not the label that you've given yourself, that your parents have given you, that a coach has given you, that some friends have given you, that your enemies gave you because of a mistake you made. Jesus doesn't see that. When God looks at you because of the finished work of Jesus on the cross, all he sees is his son and his daughter. You are his child when your faith is in Jesus. And that's really good news. Because what that means for you and me, it means that God loves us, no matter what you've done or what you could do. It means he is for you, that he has plans and dreams and hopes for your life that are far bigger than anything you could imagine for yourself, and that he's with you in the middle of your hurt, in the middle of your pain, in the middle of your depression, your anxiety. He's right there with you. This is your label. In Jesus, this is who you are. And tonight you can decide that this is what's going to be most true of you. So as I wrap up, what I want to do tonight is just talk to two groups of people in the room. The first group is for some of you, you've never actually put your faith in Jesus. You've never said yes to the finished work of the cross. And so for you, the label that most defines your life is sinner. And what that means, it's a really churchy word. All it means is this, that you fall short, you're imperfect. That you are not capable of living up to the standard that God has for you, and all of us wear that label. But the good news for you tonight, and the good news for all of us, is that Jesus left heaven. He came to the planet Earth, lived the perfect life that none of us could live. He went to the cross as a sacrifice for your sin and for my sin, even though he didn't do it. He went to a grave and he took your sin with you. And then he rose from that grave and said, anyone who puts their faith in me, anyone who puts their trust in me, no longer carries the label of sinner. They carry the label of son. They carry the label of daughter. And so for some of you tonight, the invitation that's on the table is that you need to be relabeled. And maybe for the first time, the light bulb is going off. Maybe for the first time, you're realizing and understanding, oh my gosh, I'm broken, I'm messed up, and I can't fix it on my own. I need a savior. And I don't want to be who I used to be. I don't want to be who I used to be. I want to be a son. And I want to be a daughter. And so in just a moment, I'm going to give you an opportunity, if you've never put your faith in Jesus, to do that. But before I do, I want to acknowledge the second group of people. I'm going to talk to y'all in a moment. And the second group of people in the room tonight are people who have said, yeah, I've actually already put my faith in Jesus. I've had a moment like this where I've said the prayer. I believe that Jesus died on the cross for my sin. Like, I'm in. I'm a Christian. But if you were to be honest, some things have happened in your life. You've done some things. Some people have said some things about you. And you've been living under a different label. And maybe tonight you've been reminded of what's most true about you, that you really are a child of God. And you just want to start living like it again. And so in a moment, I'm going to give you an opportunity as well. So right now, here's what we're going to do all across the room. I want all eyes closed, all heads bowed. And no one's looking around. This is a moment between you and God. But for the first group of people, you would say, I've never actually put my faith in Jesus, but tonight I want to do that for the very first time. I realize that I'm a sinner who needs a Savior, and I want my label to be a son and a daughter of God. If that's you, I'm just going to give you a chance. No one's looking around. This is just for you. It's between you and God. If you want to put your faith in Jesus for the very first time, just raise your hand wherever you are right now. That's awesome in the back row. Raise your hand high so I can see it. That's awesome right here on the third row. Keep your hands up. That's amazing right here on the second row. There's 3. Oh, that's awesome. I can't see in the back. There's one right here. That's amazing. Hey, if you just raise your hand, I'd love to say a really simple prayer. You can just repeat after me. The prayer does not save you. It's just a chance for you to say out loud what just happened in your heart. Scripture says if you believe in your heart and confess with your mouth, then you will be saved. And so you've already done the heart part. This is just your chance to say out loud to God what you believe in your heart already. So just repeat after me. So God, thank you for loving me. Thank you for sending your son Jesus to die on the cross for me. I realize that I'm a sinner, that I fall short of your standard. But tonight, I put my faith in Jesus, who died for me and who rose again. I accept you as my Savior. I give you my life. I am your son. I am your daughter. Amen. Hey, keep your heads closed just to give people space right now. If you just made that decision, if you just raised your hand, no one's looking around, we'd love for you to stand up and just go out the back doors. There's a group of people who want to talk to you and give you some next steps. So if you raised your hand and you just said that prayer, just get up right where you are. Just get up right now, right where you are. If you raised your hand and you said that prayer, just get up and push your way through the aisle and go out the back door. And there's some people back there who want to talk to you, who want to help you out, give you some space. Awesome. Okay, everyone can open your eyes, lift your head. So now to the second group of people in the room. This is for those of you who said, yeah, I've already put my faith in Jesus, but if I were to be honest, I've been labeling myself in a way other than as a son or a daughter, and tonight I'm just deciding I'm going to live like this is what's most true of me, that I am a son and a daughter of God. And so if that's you, if you're going, hey, I'm gonna live differently. I'm gonna recommit to following Jesus with everything that I have. I'm just gonna ask you to be really bold and just stand right where you are right now. Like if that's you, that's awesome. That's so good. That's amazing. That's awesome. That's so good. Come on, man. That's amazing. That's so great. That's awesome. Is there anyone else? That's awesome, man. That's amazing. That's so good. That's so good. That's amazing. That's awesome. That's so good. Hey, if you're standing right now, I'm so proud of you. I just want to say to you in this moment that this will never stop being true. That once your faith is in Jesus, you are always his son, you are always his daughter. He is pursuing you and he loves you like a father, not like your earthly father. He loves you like the perfect father that he is. There's nothing you can do to make him stop loving you, and there's nothing you can do that's gonna make him love you more. So you just keep chasing after him with everything that you have. I'd love to pray for you, and then we're gonna keep singing a few songs together. Father, thank you so much for the courage of the young men and women who just stood up, who have said, yeah, I've lived my life believing a different label, but tonight I'm deciding I want to make this true of me. And so I'm going to live like I'm your son. I'm going to live like I'm your daughter, and this is going to be the label that defines my life. Father, I pray in the moments where they doubt that they would seek you out. I pray in the moments that they're not sure, that you would remind them of who they really are. And I pray in the moments that they're weak, that you would surround them with friends who can lift them up and who can keep them on the journey of pursuing you. Father, thank you for tonight. Thank you for your heart for us. And thank you that you really are a God who relabels us. That we are your sons and your daughters. And that's true because of Jesus. We love you and we thank you.